and live on the business end of it. And that's why, in many ways, Karen and I often say that the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, is written into the very fabric of the universe as that life review, because it teaches us that, doing all those bad things that are so common in this world today to others, greed and selfishness, acts of violence, carelessness that influences other beings, we have to feel the power of that in this life review. And that's all part of a course adjustment. Deeper understanding hinges on things like NDEs and the life review as kind of course corrections to help us nudge us towards that loving and caring for each other and for ourselves. This beautiful vision I had on this butterfly wing with this incredible set of lessons unfolding, well, it turns out that was just the gateway, as I call it, the gateway valley, to much higher and higher levels. And I remember at that point seeing all of four-dimensional space-time kind of collapsing down. And then those spiritual levels, including a whole different ordering of causality that I call deep time. Deep time is the much more fundamental ordering of our progress as individual souls, but also contributing to the evolution of all consciousness. Because just as Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said in his book, Phenomenon of Man in the mid-20th century, evolution is much more than just biological evolution as in Darwinian teachings. There's a much grander kind of evolution going on. And that's where deep time measures kind of all of sentience in the universe contributing to this incredible growth towards that oneness. And so I ascended through all those levels, witnessing all of that collapsing down and all of dualities coming into oneness in the core realm. The core, infinite inky blackness, but filled to overflowing with the dazzling light of that infinitely loving God source. And it's just where all paradoxes, all polarities come together, male, female, good, bad, all of these things, darkness and light, come together in that core realm of pure oneness. And the interesting thing was my sense in that realm that all of us have that God force, that infinitely healing force of pure love of that God. And I came back from this world calling it Om because of the sound I heard there. And also realizing, as you point out with Sufism, that whether you call it God or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit, I don't care what words you use. But as Sufism teaches, deep at the heart, and Baha'i faith is also quite far along this pathway of understanding of the unity of the message of the prophets and the unity of religions in their deepest meditative traditions. But what you find there at the core is incredible, infinite healing power of love. And what we see that as sentient beings is opportunities for kindness and compassion and mercy and acceptance and taking care of each other, taking care of the least, the last, and the lost. Refugees, poverty, all of this is our opportunity as sentient beings to bring all of this up towards that love by channeling that love through ourselves and caring for others. That's the deep lesson this world needs to hear. So in this core realm, many, many deep lessons, profound lessons that I'm still unraveling through daily meditation. I meditate an hour or two a day using sacred acoustics. Tones is my major tool for getting deep into these meditative states. So I'm still unraveling so much of what I learned there. But two examples, I think, kind of set the stage. I had these fantastic visions in the core that showed me the reality. It was really one that I call the flying fish version. And it really kind of saw us as flying fish. And so we'd be down in the water swimming along in this dense material realm, kind of dumbed down, not remembering kind of our higher soul existence from between lives. And then, we'd learn our lessons and teach lessons, and they were fueled by that. I mean, being in this material realm is an important part. That kind of forgetting is there to help us learn more deeply these profound lessons by living them here in this realm where we haven't necessarily remembered those great gifts of our soul growth between lives, although over time it all accumulates and assimilates. But in this flying fish version, then we pop up out of the water. And that's back when we're between lives, going through life reviews, realizing that binding force of love, and planning next incarnations for deeper and deeper lessons to help us in growing and teaching others. And then we dive back in. And that was one beautiful vision that it took me a while to understand, but very clearly was talking about life reviews and kind of planned problems. The hardships in life are gifts. They mark out milestones that help us to progress. And it's how we deal with those hardships, illness, injury, things like that, that help us to grow. So I came to embrace the hardships in my life through this and saw them for what they truly were, which were incredible gifts to help me to manifest this love for self and others. The other vision that I also had, and it was through a completely different passage through the core realm, because what would happen is inexplicably, I would tumble back down from that core realm, that sanctum sanctorum of the divine, of that infinitely healing God. And I'd find myself back in that earthworm's eye view, that very primitive, coarse realm that in many ways resembles the Bardos of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But anyway, so in another journey through the core, ascending through, I'd always go through that middle layer of the Gateway Valley with a beautiful guardian angel reassuring me with her loving message. And then I would ascend back up again through that portal of those angelic choirs in the Gateway Valley to the core realm. And on another passage, that all of this is a form of grace towards oneness with the divine. And the way I saw that is this vision was this incredible, what I call Indra's net, because it resembles Indra's net from Eastern spiritual traditions. And I saw the interwoven threads of life of each and every kind of soul line, all woven together, interweaved, and the same kind of weaving was as of what I'd seen with those flying fish. But now it was this weave of this beautiful web that led toward this brilliant golden center. And that was really, in many ways, that Christ energy as Teilhard de Chardin expressed it. That all is evolving towards a oneness with the divine. Now, don't confuse that with some Christian idea per se, because it's really a much more general vision of an infinitely loving destiny for sentient life throughout the universe. And that certainly includes humankind as we come to realize this much deeper vision of how we are evolving, how all of consciousness is evolving. And in fact, I would say from our perspective now, that destiny, that evolution that was so apparent to me in that Indra's net was much grander, because right now we can only really see about 5,000 years of human history and destiny and kind of our projections for the future. But that's only a tiny part of our bigger overall contribution to the evolution of all sentience. And from our perspective now, as humans who have these spiritual experiences and then try as best we can to bring those messages back to this world, we're still somewhat limited in this consciousness is not created by the brain, but it's filtered by the brain. Primordial consciousness is allowed in. And in here, it's very difficult to see much further than maybe a few centuries in terms of this evolution and where it's headed. So I don't believe that anyone today can really bring back the bigger horizon view of where it's all headed. I think we can experience it. We can go in deep meditation and sometimes be gifted by the universe with a profound vision of where it's headed. But good luck trying to convert that into an earthly language that we can share here. It's one of the reasons near-death experiences are so difficult to explain, is because our modes of knowing in those realms are so much grander. It's like drinking from consciousness through a fire hose. It's a far grander, more powerful. I mean, when you have a life review and you go through the most important teaching points of your life in extremely real fashion, reliving them in many ways and feeling it from the emotional perspective of those around you, not from your own perspective. That's where life reviews are showing us two powerful things. That time flow, as we see it in this realm, is very artificial. This time flow is there to support the stage setting for the drama to unfold. But in deeper reality, that flow of deep time is a far more powerful concept of the accumulation and assimilation of information as all sentient beings contribute to this incredible growth. Now, in my own journey, as I said, I would cycle through these realms. I would tumble back down from that core realm all the way back to Earthworm's Eye View. But I was always told in the core, you're not here to stay. We'll teach you many things. You'll be going back. I even had come to believe that going back was going back to the Earthworm's Eye View, because I'd learned that by conjuring up those musical notes, I could re-enter that wormhole that led me up into the Gateway Valley, and thence the angelic choirs provided yet another portal into the core realm. But they weren't kidding. And there came a time when I tried to conjure up those musical notes, and it no longer led to a portal into the Gateway Valley. So I was kind of stuck in these lowest murky realms, but I already knew I could deeply trust in the universe, that I would be taken care of, that I had nothing to fear. I remember it was at that point that I saw circles of beings out around me going off into the mists, thousands of them, heads bowed, some with hoods, some with candles, many with their hands like this, and this murmuring energy was coming from them. And that murmuring energy to me was very surprising, because in many ways, as I labeled it, weeks later when I was writing it all up, I said it was the power of prayer. It was my sense of many kind of sentient beings that were welcoming me back. I didn't know where I was going. I still was not able to know that it was coming back to this world. But in fact, it was very reassuring. And the shocking thing was that same murmuring energy down in this murky realm brought me the same peace and love and sense of comfort and being home as I had sensed in the higher realms, in the Gateway Valley and in the core. And so I was very comfortable with this presence and this loving energy. And it was at that point where I mentioned the 6 faces that appeared to me. They would kind of bubble up out of the muck. They would mouth a few words. I didn't understand any of the words. And then they would go back into the muck. And the reason they were important, I remember them to this day visually, in my mind, the impact of seeing them. And it was important because those 6 faces, 5 of them were physically present in the ICU room the last 24 hours of my coma. And that's important because there were many other friends and loved ones who had been in that same room during the earlier days of my coma who I had no memory of. So in many ways, these visions of these faces helped me to time when the vast majority of my coma happened. It turns out that the one face who was not physically present was an old family friend. I had first met her actually as a freshman in English in undergraduate at UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina. And we became good friends, but then we lost touch for a long time. And then she was refriended by my former spouse, the woman I was married to during my coma. And so my former spouse knew that this woman, her name is Susan Renches, and she had done a lot of spiritual work. In fact, she wrote a book called Third Eye Open, where she would go into a channeled trance and she would help people who were, very, very ill, including a lot of people who were in coma. And so my family called her up while I was deep in coma and asked her to intervene. So from 120 miles away in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, she would use her trance state and come into my awareness. And I was as fully aware of her presence as of those 5 people who were also physically present. So when I first came out of coma and I was explaining, oh, and you were there, and oh, and Susan Renches was there, that's when my family said, well, no, she wasn't physically here, but on nights 4 and 5 of your coma, she actually channeled in from far away. And to me, it was like, of course, in those realms, physical distance is not an issue. But her presence to me was as real as the others. And of course, I had no knowing of that when I had the NDE, that they were invoking her, to come help me come out of coma. But also the important thing is what those 6 faces showed me was that the vast majority of this coma experience had to happen between days 1 and 5 of my coma. And the reason that's important, as the case report goes into, is during those periods, my Glasgow Coma Scale, which is a clinical measure of how deep someone is in coma, was very deep coma. There was an 11 that I scored in the emergency room only because I said the words, "God help me." And that automatically kicked my score up. I have no memory of saying those words at all. They were witnessed by many people who reported it to me later. In fact, I said those words after a few hours of just garbled moans and groans and being in deep coma and having seizures. And so when they heard those words, my family thought maybe I was going to come back, but they were the last words I said before I dove deep into coma. So most of my coma, including most of that ER experience, the best Glasgow coma scale I had was 6 or 7. At times it was as low as 5. Anything below 9 is deep coma. You or I would have a 15 on the Glasgow coma scale. A corpse would score a 3. But, I was in deep coma with a disease that had been very carefully analyzed by my doctors, by scans and all. They proved in that case report there was no way to have a hallucination or dream or drug effect that could have given me this kind of confabulatory phenomenal awareness. And that explains why it was way too real to be real, was because it was from being freed from the shackles of my brain that allowed my soul to have this profound realization. And so it turns out, as I mentioned, I saw the 6 faces, and it was sometime after that, I couldn't really tell from within the coma, but within a day or hours, that I actually started coming back to this world. And I tell that story in Proof of Heaven. But the shocking thing to my family was, even as I was waking up in that ICU room, and then they pulled out the breathing tube, I was wrecked. I mean, I didn't recognize who they were. My mother, my sons, my sisters at the bedside. I had no idea who these beings were. All I knew was where I had just been, that extraordinary journey. And the interesting thing, I thought that journey would fade because I would tell my doctors about it. And they'd say, "Oh, well, you were very sick. In fact, your whole brain was soaking in pus. We have no idea how you're coming back to us now. But you can forget about it because the dying brain plays all kinds of tricks." Okay, so I took my doctor's advice. Forget about it. Dying brain plays all kinds of tricks. But after I talked with my oldest son, who was majoring in neuroscience at the time, and he had been there during my coma. He had, with the rest of the family, held my hand 24/7, trying to keep me anchored to this world. And he came home from school 2 days after I got out of the hospital. It was the day before Thanksgiving in 2008. And I told him it was way too real to be real. And I wanted to study everything I could about near-death experiences, because to me, there was something very powerful going on here. And he was the one who advised me, write everything down before you read anybody else's near-death experience. It's the best advice I've ever gotten. I wrote about 20,000 words over 6 weeks without reading anyone else's NDE, without studying anything else about kind of consciousness and these broader spiritual experiences. And only then did I dive in the literature. And that's where I was absolutely shocked to find the similarities with my experience, that NDEs go back thousands of years, that they have a tremendous amount of overlap between cultures and religious beliefs. There are many accounts from atheists who have had profound encounters with God in an NDE that changed them entirely. And so all of this, especially when you study the science of it, and that's what we do, especially in our third book, Living in a Mindful Universe. That book is the true proof of heaven in many ways. It goes far beyond all this, shows how this is totally consistent with modern quantum-informed science of consciousness. And by that, I mean, we need a much richer and deeper understanding of the message of quantum physics to understand how all this works, because, this heavenly realm and these God forces are not, somewhere kind of trapped in the physical realm. The physical realm is a projection from the mental realm. And that is something that's very clear to many quantum physicists. You can go to the scientific journal Nature in 2005, find the article by Richard Kahn Henry, who is a physicist at Johns Hopkins University, a one-page essay called Mental Universe. It's on my website. If you go to ebenalexander.com, there's a reading list with more than 100 references to books and chapters and papers, many of them with active links to take you right to those papers. And it's all categorized. You can use that reading list on ebenalexander.com to get to a lot of the information about all of this. But the quantum physics connection is quite clear. The lesson the quantum physics has been trying to teach us, as many of the founding fathers, like Erwin Schrödinger, Wolfgang Pauli, Pascual Jordan, Erwin Schrödinger, and others all noted how quantum experience proved the fundamental primacy of consciousness in the universe. Consciousness is not created by the brain. It comes from this primordial mind that we encounter in these deep mystical experiences, in deep prayer, in moments of spiritual epiphanies. All of these are ways that we kind of leap through the veil of the veiling function of the physical brain and come more in connection with that infinitely healing force of God. And that's why, in so many ways, the quantum-informed science of consciousness is leading the way for humanity to a much deeper understanding of who we are and how we fit in to all of this. And that was kind of the journey I've been on in the 13 years since my coma, working with scientists around the world to discover these deeper truths and share them with all. It's very important in our modern polarized world to realize we're all truly in this together through that binding force of love.
Dr. Eben, you know, when I'm with scientists and we are talking especially on neuroscience and quantum physics, because I believe the universe is a big brain. So I definitely believe that we are living in a mental universe. In a way, we are self-simulating our own universe within our brains. And but there are the frequencies outside, and our brains are acting like a decoder, just like a TV. And what we are seeing is actually representations, not just like on a TV. You don't see the person. Just like right now, I'm not seeing you, but I am seeing you, a reflection of you.
Right, an image,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, an image of you. So, you know, I mostly work on Quran and then Bible and the ancient texts and Plato and Socrates and all of them, and the cave, you know, phenomena, which is for me is the brain. And I have read this case also that I have written about. The person is called the Cold Blue Luke. He was thrown into Alcatraz years ago. And after he went into a fight there, he was put into the cell of Alcatraz. So he was actually deprivated from all the stimulations that are there for the senses. We Sufis do that already because as you know, all of our prophets and the Prophet Muhammad said, die before you die. Human is asleep, so you will wake up when you die. So die before you die is to get rid of these senses that limit you and give you a sense of self. I call the self in three layers: a cortical self, an emotional and animal-like self, and a divine self. But mostly scientists are working on the computational self, which is the animal and the cortical self. And this is why they think that artificial intelligence can be something like human, but intelligence, the word, even the words, you know, data and information is everywhere. But to bring that into knowledge, it needs to be digested. But wisdom is only with human. Wisdom is something else, and it's beyond what we call reality, because the word reality comes from the root Latin res. It means things, representations. Right. So what we learned from the Quran and Sufism is that go beyond what's reality. Go beyond what's reality, what you see. So these things that, just like you explained, for me is so out there right now, especially neuroscience has come to such a point that they are like still, struggling over if the brain is, generating consciousness, which is impossible, because we know, for example, we have rubber hand tests. You can manipulate the brain in so many ways that you know that somebody's using this body. Right. But it's not that the body we think we are the car, but we are the drivers. So just like you mentioned, so what happens is when you get to the next step of your life is that you change the car. So I would want to say something about the root word of science, so that then want to pass the word to you. Consciousness, the word science comes from the word conscious. So kan means together. And shis comes from the root that is Quranic Arabic, means the tree. So the word science comes from consciousness. That shis there is the root word of science. So science is actually the unraveling of the consciousness. So it is a proof that there is something beyond, just like Max Planck said. There is something beyond this matrix that we see. So it is so amazing that the word matrix in Arabic, in Turkish, means the womb. Mm-hmm. So we are, just like you explained, when you're in the womb of your mother, you think that's the world. You think that is the world. And so you sleep, you are eating and everything is being given to you. But one day you are given birth and you see, oh my God, that wasn't the one. This is the one. Mm-hmm. So this is our situation at the moment. And these things that you mentioned are so important, because in scientific terms, there is this person called Sam Parnia. I'm sure you have heard about him.
Yes, sure.
He comes up with near-death experience explanation. People who have cardiac arrests, and then after 72 hours, they come up. If their brain is not, like washed with all this medicine that's given, they say, I saw my spirit, I saw myself, and I saw these people. And people say, how could you know that? Just like you were explaining right now, I think psychedelics is another issue that is, in a way, helping this as a medication. Right. So can you please give us the definition of consciousness for you, and do you think there is a problem with the definition of God, so that people think they are talking about different things, but actually it is all one thing? And people are, in Tasawwuf, Sufism, there is this word saying, God is in the interpretation of the slave. So we are creating our own gods, and then when we see in the religious text, because we don't understand in essence, we come up with a God feature who is not feeding the African children, there, and because we do not understand that we are his vehicle, that he's everywhere and he's within us acting. So what do you think about this understanding?
Well, I think we could probably talk for about 4 or 5 hours on everything you've just said. There's a tremendous amount to cover, but I think to kind of put it in perspective, I'd like to make a few points. One is that from the viewpoint of quantum physics, I would just refer people to the work of John Wheeler. He was the head of physics at Princeton. He was a renowned quantum physicist. And he came up with something called the participatory anthropic principle. Very, very important concept. And what he was doing, he was referring to the deep mystery of contextuality. Contextuality in quantum physics is the fact that the mental kind of workings of the investigating scientists, so, whether to look for wave or particle qualities of a photon, for example, has this deep and profound influence on the measured physical reality. And in the context he presented that, he was talking about what's called a delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. That's very deep and complex. I won't take time to go into all of that now, but it basically, what the findings in quantum physics imply is that the photon may come from a quasar 10 billion light years away, past an intervening galaxy that acts as a gravitational lens. But then the observational decisions in the mental state of the observing astronomer tonight actually determines the kind of wave and particle properties of that photon going all the way back to its beginning. And the way he put it, the way Wheeler put it, is to be perceived. In fact, he claimed when he said that to be in alignment with George Berkeley, the famous Irish theologian who 2 centuries earlier had noted the reality of idealism, who said, you don't need a world out there. All you need is the percipient, for the mind to perceive it. And in so many ways, that's exactly what is going on. The material world does not exist except as it is a projection from the mental layer of the universe. And this is an extraordinarily important thing. We often talk in this modern science of consciousness, the brain is not the creator, it's the filter, but it allows in a primordial unified consciousness. And that, of course, is what we experience in a near-death or shared-death experience, spontaneous epiphanies, children who report intermission memories between lives, things like that are all about traversing that veil. But the interesting thing is we can do it in meditation. Karen and I have shown that in sacred acoustics meditation workshops, where people can have profound spiritual experiences, where they personally go through many of the main features, say from Bruce Grayson's 16-point near-death experience rating scale, but they can do that through meditation. So you can cultivate this. Just as you were saying earlier, die before you die. That's the crucial thing. And we can all do that in meditation. We can explore these worlds. It's what for example, the Tibetan dream work is all about, using lucid dreaming to explore spiritual realms, so that when you physically die, it's no biggie, because you've been there, done that. And that's exactly what all of us have power to do. But it's the science of this, of science of consciousness, which we discuss in detail in Living in a Mindful Universe. I would advise anybody who wants to get into the deep levels of science, go to uvadops.org, or especially check out the 3-volume trilogy from Ed Kelly. And believe me, these are deep and powerful books. But if you claim to be a scientist interested in this stuff, at a minimum, you need to read all 3 of these books. The first is called Irreducible Mind. It came out in 2007. Again, Ed Kelly at UVA Division of Perceptual Studies was the lead editor. It's 800 pages of dense empirical data supporting the reality of non-local consciousness. Because, if you don't understand the reality of things like telepathy, precognition, remote viewing, out-of-body experiences, remote healing, power of prayer to heal, psychokinesis, must be bundled into any modern discussion of consciousness. The second book from Ed Kelly came out, it was called Beyond Physicalism. That came out, I believe, in 2015. I endorsed that book strongly, and it's a very powerful scientific book about this. But then more recently, in spring of this year, of 2021, he put out his third book. It's called Consciousness Unbound. And I'm the lead endorser on the cover of that book. So obviously we have a lot in common in our sharing. But the reality is, I think Ed Kelly and Division of Perceptual Studies has done a tremendous amount to promote the science of all this. For example, Henry Stapp is a quantum physicist who's contributed to this work very profoundly. And what we have to realize is, the neuroscientists who still believe the brain creates consciousness are still living in a pre-quantum world where they're looking at ions and ion channels and molecules in synaptic vesicles, all being, like Newtonian billiard balls with purely deterministic kind of physics and chemistry. No, they're absolutely quantum phenomena. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle reigns supreme at the level of the ion channel and synaptic cleft. And that is where this primordial consciousness can serve as kind of the source of our awareness. And the brain is this reducing valve or filter that limits certain states. But what is driving the bus here is this top-down causality. And in quantum physics, you can read, for example, George F.R. Ellis. He's a South African mathematician who's written extensively on top-down causality in quantum physics. And this is in opposition to the kind of simplistic view of some in science who pretend that it's all bottom-up causality, that the photons and electrons and atoms and molecules all operating by quantum principles are somehow generating this reality through deterministic physical laws. But no, this is the reason free will is absolutely alive and well. Materialist science will try and tell you you don't have free will. Consciousness is an illusion of the chemical reactions and electron fluxes in the brain. Pay it no mind, they will tell you. Well, the reality is this top-down causality is the way the universe works. In fact, when you get deep into the analysis in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, we make a strong argument for idealism for objective idealism and this mental layer of the universe running the whole show. But in many ways, as you dissolve our kind of simple limiting definitions of things like consciousness and God, what you realize is it allows a unity, a oneness with God, just as near-death experiencers and many Sufis and other meditators of, Hindu, Buddhist, secular meditation, what have you, have all approached that same kind of infinite oneness. And this is where all of it comes together. In Living in a Mindful Universe, we support the science of consciousness and the synthesis of science and spirituality, not only through neuroscience and what's going on, at those deep levels, although a new book is in the works to explain that much more fully. But also things like philosophy of mind, where the binding of consciousness and also the apparent dissociation of our consciousness from other beings, into alters. If you want to follow the kind of quantum physics, metaphysical arguments there, I would steer you to Carlo Rovelli and his relational interpretation of the measurement paradox in quantum physics. Combine that with Bernardo Kastrup with a K. You can go to bernardokastrup.com to learn a lot more. He's a big endorser of our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, and we certainly have endorsed his beautiful books, including The Idea of the World, which came out just a few years ago. But all of this leads to a much deeper and richer understanding of science and spirituality and how ultimately they are coming together. In many ways, I love that quote from Werner Heisenberg, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics, I think in 1932, for his work in quantum physics. And he said, the first sip from the glass of natural sciences will lead you towards atheism, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. He was not talking about just a Christian God. He was talking about this infinite healing force of love, kindness, compassion, and co-creative power at the core of all the universe and at the core of each and every one of our conscious awareness. That's why we come in touch with that after a near-death experience, after we're liberated from the shackles of the physical brain. So just an extraordinary body of evidence. You also mentioned psychedelic drugs. I think it's very important to point out, we talk about this a lot in Living in a Mindful Universe. I do not recommend the casual use of these substances by anybody. And in fact, I would strongly recommend meditation. I think you can get a lot more power and true results from meditation or an NDE than from using these substances. But there are two reasons I'm happy that these substances are now being studied again scientifically. And I'll be very brief about this because I know I've been long-winded here. The first is that there is a series of papers since 2012 that have come out looking at functional MRI, magnetoencephalography, other very powerful tools for looking at activity in the brain on people who are under the influence of something like psilocybin, LSD, DMT, dimethyltryptamine, the active principle in ayahuasca. And what you find is in all these lab studies, the brain goes dark. There's no brain cell, no neuron anywhere that lights up, that shows more activity. The brain is getting out of the way. That's exactly what happened in my coma when my neocortex was taken offline. Although, of course, my offline neocortex with meningitis was far more powerful than the minuscule effect of these plant medicines or entheogens like psilocybin on the neocortex on certain receptors. But it's important to point out the brain goes dark. The brain is not creating those powerful phenomenal experiences. The other key thing to mention about modern use of psychedelics in medical studies is there's a body of literature using 1 or 2 or maybe 3 doses of psilocybin in a good therapeutic setting that in many ways to me are just showing what happens when your higher soul gets engaged to help in healing. Because psilocybin is found to be incredibly powerful at curing some of the worst addictions known, like nicotine, which is the most powerful physiologic addiction, opioids, alcoholism, and also psilocybin has been used very effectively against a morbid kind of debilitating fear of death in terminal cancer patients. But you don't take psilocybin every day. You take it 1 or 2 or 3 times in this proper therapeutic setting, and From my point of view, what you're doing is the same thing you do through meditation. You're engaging that higher soul. And I'm busy doing the scientific work now, trying to create the pilot studies that will help prove that fact, that sacred acoustic binaural beat brainwave entrainment, which is a very powerful tool against anxiety. For example, Dr. Anna Yusim's pilot study in February 2020 Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases demonstrates how powerful sacred acoustic was in alleviating anxiety over 2 weeks. 27% of patients, 27% reduction in anxiety symptoms versus only 7% in controls. So anyway, what I'm trying to clarify here is that we all have tremendous power to heal. We talk about placebo effect and spontaneous remission of cancers and infections in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. And of course, near-death experiences with this profound miraculous healing, like my case or that of Anita Moorjani or that of Mary C. Neal, orthopedic surgeon in a 30-minute warm water drowning who had full recovery. Anita Moorjani, her lymphoma went away. These are all examples of how powerful spiritual healing can help us. So there are plenty of lessons here evolving from this modern science of consciousness.
When, Dr. Eben, I'm sorry,
Right.
you know, when I'm listening to you, it's like you know, God has given you such a wonderful way to put everything in such a way for us to understand it easier in an easier way. Normally, I think is when we're talking about the sound, Rumi says that the language of God is music, and as a musician, you know. I use you know, I play piano and you know, I play instruments. So when the instrument is out of tune, we call it out of chord. It's out of chord because we say, okay, let's do a chord to it. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the word heart comes from the root cardiology, and that comes from chord. So you know, if something is not, you feel I didn't feel him, there's something wrong about him, that's because your instrument is actually feeling that vibration, that frequency, and telling you that's dangerous, that's not okay, because right. This is such a wonderful instrument. It went into science as cardiology, but it's coming from a musical understanding that is, you know, chord, a chord. So everything is sound, because when you look at the Bible, when you look at Quran, let there be light, there's sound there. When you look at Quran, it says kun. So he said, let it be, and it happened. So when you look at it as the brain, we call something that is called ultrasound. When you're trying to see a baby in the womb of a mother, what you give is actually, you send sound waves. And they get echoed from there. And with physioelectric, they turn into a shape. So that's what we are. We are shape forms of frequencies. So that is why there is this law in the universe, because, you know, I'm also I'm so into what you are teaching, and because I also talk about John Wheeler, you know, Max Planck, and all these scientists, and Heisenberg and Schrödinger. You know, they saw it, they knew it. Einstein, for example, general relativity comes from the teaching of a Sufi master called Ibn Arabi. It comes from the 12th and the 3rd centuries. And, you know, these people, for example, when we are working on Sufis, we fast and then work on our breath, and then we use sounds in Quran, and then we experience things beyond this what we call reality, and you see that everything is alive. This is a living universe, just like you mentioned. Right. But this prefrontal cortex is giving us, as long as it's so active, it's giving us this understanding of self. But there is this new teaching that is called the flow state. I'm sure you know it, of course, and Stephen Kotler. And what is, for example, all these prophets told us to submit, submit. You know, the word Sufi and Islam means the one who submits. So you have actually no other chance than to submit, because you are in an illusion. You're touching your face is an illusion, because the electrons of your face are pushing the electrons of your fingers. So the thing, you are living in a delayed world, because your brain is processing the information and you think everything is synchronized. As long as you are looking through this filter, you are not online with the universe. So in that respect, it's okay that scientists think we have no free will, because they're looking from the cortical self, the emotional, the computational self. But when you look at the religious books, you look that God is talking from present, past, and future at the same time. Just like Einstein said, the past and the present, you know, it's an illusion, but a persistent one. It's because as long as you don't have hypofrontality, you think that there's me, I'm touching myself, I'm eating this. So so neuroscientists, I think, in this issue, that is why I think you are, again, somebody, you know, you're a very special soul. Everybody is special, but certain people are selected. That's how I believe. You're a neuroscientist, because when these neurosurgeons, just like yourself, and neuroscience friends who said to you, you were hallucinating, you were the one who showed them, I cannot hallucinate because look at my neocortex, everything is out. There's no way, you know? So I think the dream state is very important to understand. And just like Prophet Joseph, he's talking about this. And, you know, Ibn Arabi said in one of his books, I highly recommend you read them, because what you will see is more than what we see. Because all this science background, he says that the universe is like this. It's reconstructed, deconstructed, reconstructed, deconstructed. But the brain is giving us a stable, you know, view. And when you get into a car, you are shaking. But in this universe, who is running in this world, planet that is running to a black hole, you're not feeling anything. Everything is stable. Everything is fractal geometry, Euclidean geometry. This is all an illusion. So he says that the universe is deconstructing and reconstructing itself all the time in such a speed that we cannot see it, and we see it as a constant, you know, illusionary way, as a constant universe. So that is why the free will issue, I think, is very important to understand, because just like you mentioned, there's time and there's the time. We call that moment. As Sufis, we say there is time and there is the moment. So that's a general knowledge as far as I know too. But this is a movie that is already shot. We have already made our choices. We are now witnessing ourselves. So even that is a proof that is showing what the religious texts are saying. We are right now witnessing Eben. You are actually witnessing Dr. Eben. I'm witnessing Denise. And we have already made these choices in a deep time way, but now we are like recognizing the choices. So it's so beautiful once you understand the layers of self and the layers of what we call God's consciousness, because the only difference is we are like living in the mind of God. And the only difference that is going on is the interfaces that we use. The animal, the dog is using an interface with a big nose and everything. And every human's DNA is interface. We have an objective reality and a subjective reality, but we are within this consciousness. So just breaking down these frequencies, just like a TV channel. But if we have a cable TV, then we're gonna see more realities, you know, just like you have experienced. So to do that is to die before you die, which was given to you as a gift, not with your will. It was given to you. It was gifted to you, and this is somebody who experiences that, goes after that all the time. Rumi says, give it to me one more time. You know, when he's talking to God, I want to go through that just one more time. And so about the free will issue, and do you think that this will be understood by scientists? I mean, I don't know if that is how to ask this, but this free will issue, because I listen to Sam Harris and I look at him and I think of him, he's talking about Sufism, because all the examples he's giving is Sufism, but he's giving it in another terminology. He thinks that this is why, because he has given another definition of God. So that normally somebody is sitting up there, which is, is not all around us. And because when you say that, they call you panpsychist, that's another issue.
Right.
So do you think we will get closer to the understanding of time, space, time, and that is, Robert Lanza says it's in our prefrontal cortex. And once we get rid of the prefrontal cortex, he's a very well-known scientist as well, but not in the, mainstream media. These people, you cannot find them as much as the others. Do you think this will be solved by these new coming, scientific neuroscientific facts and quantum physics facts? What is your idea about this?
Well, I think there's a lot to what you just said, but yes, I think certainly to have any understanding of space and time, we need a much deeper understanding of the nature of consciousness and how this mental layer of the universe uses the brain and the body and the physical universe to project kind of from the ideal, from the realm of ultimate will. You made some interesting comments early on there about the heart and about kind of music and the overlap. And I remember thinking, there's this phrase cognitive dissonance, which is in English, where your thinking is kind of mismatched. They're dissonant, not like the sound is not quite correct. And in many ways that is true. And I think it's important to kind of reemphasize with people music, vibration, frequency. Of course, in these deep spiritual realms, none of that is limited by, sounds that would be heard by an ear. I know in debates with physicalist scientists, they've told me, well, you can't have seen that because those photons weren't striking your retina. Well, no, that's not where vision and kind of image comes from. It comes at a much deeper level. And in fact, we're all aware of that kind of tight linkage of memory with vibration and frequency just by our ability to remember music. I can hear a song I haven't heard in 5 decades, and yet the words, the music, everything will go through my mind in alignment with the tone being played now, the music being played now. And that's because our memory more fundamentally is aligned with vibration and frequency. So, and there are things that are vibrating, in this kind of deep time spiritual element that are not at all like the vibrations of things in the physical realm. And yet in many ways, they're a deeper, more primitive form of it. And that's why our memory for music is so much better than our memory for many other things. It's because it's that frequency relationship. And I would say getting much deeper into this reality from a scientific viewpoint, one of the things that I've found to be very attractive is, for example, Bernard Carr. He's a British physicist, and he's written extensively about hyperspatial, hyperdimensional explanations of reality. Of course, this is somewhat along the lines of things like string theory. I'm not the biggest fan of string theory because in many ways it's an infinite set of possibilities that can never be scientifically proven. But in many ways, it kind of leads us to a deeper understanding because we generally think of 3 spatial dimensions, 1 temporal dimension. And yet I believe the way that these kind of experiences can manifest is due to those compactified dimensions, the ones that are wrapped up within the 3 spatial dimensions and also additional temporal dimensions that would explain things like deep time. And I think that, if we got more deeply into that kind of analysis, I mean, believe me, it's a far, far way into the future before we'll have a fuller understanding of that kind of thing. But at least there is some work being done now to come up with a scientific way of explaining all this. Again, not one that is kind of misled by the bleak and paltry fiction of materialism, but takes kind of quantum physics and modern evolution in physics to a next level of understanding of how our kind of mental experience of existence can harvest material from outside of our 4-dimensional space-time. I mean, that's where all the value of the paranormal, the parapsychological things, telepathy, precognition, psychokinesis, all the things I mentioned a while ago, is so important because it shows us this non-local consciousness at work. And that's how remote viewing can work. That we can sense things at a distance and across time, not necessarily just in the now, but even into the future. We can come to know things. Precognition, Daryl Bem's work has been shown beyond any reasonable doubt to be absolutely real, that we have a way of sensing the future, at least seconds or minutes in the future, quite statistically powerfully in ways that completely refute any simplistic, brain creates mind kind of materialist view of reality. So there's a lot of this kind of more advanced science of consciousness that helps to take us to a different level. But ultimately, for each and every one of us as individual souls, once you realize that your brain does not create consciousness out of physical matter, but that in fact your consciousness creates the brain, the body, all of physical reality as a stage of projection. But that world of ideals allows us to gain information, from other minds and at a distance and things like that, and even have a profound access to, our lives in past lives, present and future lives. There's a tremendous amount of possibility here once we start exploring it, because as Einstein said, past, present, and future are a stubbornly wrought illusion. And he said that in reference to his friend, Michel Besso, who had just passed. And this was months before Einstein himself passed in April of 1955. But he realized by that time that, as he said, those of us who believe in physics realize that what we interpret as time is no, there is something much deeper going on. And our mental awareness can move beyond this apparent here and now in the physical realm. And that's where I think true creativity, mathematical creativity, all of this really comes from our ability to more deeply access that primordial mind, in many ways that God force that's at the core of our very conscious awareness.
Yes, it's been almost our time, and I don't want to get you too tired, because you know me, how you see how I am. I can ask you so many questions because I think you are very important to this world and for humanity, and you should be everywhere, and you should reach everyone, so that, because especially we are going to a crisis in the world right now with all these COVID things, and I think it's also mercy from God, because it's now time to really question why we are here, and that this simulation, this divine simulation, is not the real one. So we have to understand why we are here and what our mission is, and we have to get ready for the next level of life. That is the real life, just like you said. So before I will close our session, which is for me, as I said, so wonderful. So I'm so happy this chance was given to me by God, and then you. And I would like to say that the root words are giving up everything. When we look at the etymology, even the word cosmos is coming from the same root of cosmetics. So this is a place to get beautiful, to beautify your soul.
It is beautiful.
It is beautiful. And it is here to actually upgrade your version of existence. And it is not a punishment place. It is a place to witness yourself, your true divine being. And the word psychology comes from the root psyche, which means breath and wind. That wind that you felt while you were experiencing all that. Yes. Yes. So when you're working on psychology, actually you are working on somebody's divine feature. So if you know that you're not working on something mechanistic, then that will help the way you look at it. I would like to end with something before, like, give the word to you to end it. But there is this the story of Elvis Presley, because Ibn Arabi says the end is the beginning and the beginning is the end. So once you understand that the way you perceive time is actually because of this physical interface that you think you have, that you think you are caged in, just like Sufis say, you are put in a cage. This soul, just like a bird, is put in a cage. Is actually, we are actually remembering our future. We are not, the word education comes from the root educato, which means to bring out what you have inside.
Right.
Yes, it's such a beautiful word. It is telling you to undress from everything that you learned here, actually, because the real treasure is within yourself. So the more you dig into this simulation, the self-simulated world, is forget what you have and run after things that is just like, on your computer, that is as real as that much on the screen. So when this Elvis Presley, when he was, I think 2 or 3, his father went into a prison. So his mother took him, and they went to a family friend, their relatives, to live with them. And what happened is, of course, they were living in the edge of like the threshold of poorness. Mm-hmm. After, when he was 5 years old, his father came out of the prison, and for the first time, Elvis would celebrate a birthday party. So his mother had like $10 or $13, something like that, and she asked Elvis, "What do you want me to buy you?" And he said, "I want a bicycle." And then what happened is she with that money, she began to look at all the stores to find a bicycle. She looked at the new ones, they were very expensive. And it was almost the evening that she couldn't find a bicycle for him with the money that she had. But she went into the store, this old store, to buy her a bicycle. So she went in there and she saw this bicycle that was very old. She said, "Can I buy this bicycle? How much is this?" And the guy looked at his her money, and he said, this is more than that. And she was so upset. And then she just put her head like that, and she was about to leave the store, when she, at the right of the store, the right corner of the store, she saw this guitar. This gives me the goosebumps. Dr. Eben, this is a divine scenario. It is so beautiful, so beautiful. So everything that you go through is in the plan of the divine. So once you learn to trust it, just like you mentioned, mm-hmm. and you try to understand the reason that's beyond that, the pain that if you're struggling, is because it is trying to teach you, it's trying to push you to the other way, that you are going on the wrong way. And that was what gave that guitar, made Elvis Presley's legend. So
that's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
What a great story.
What a great story. Just like yours, Dr. Eben. Just like yours. I lost my father when I was 5. And I grew up thinking, what's death? And if you ask me, would you come to the world again, Denise, and have your father? Definitely not. Because that is what gave me the search for what is death? Where is God, if there is one? What is this that I'm going through? So there is only mercy and love and compassion. We just have to learn how to look at it, and we have to also understand how to submit. And once we submit, you see that you're doing nothing. It is just pushing you to what you should turn into. Absolutely. So thank you so much for this. And please end this room with whatever you would like to share with us as a last word.
Well, I'd simply like to say that we call ourselves Homo sapiens. Sapiens means wise. When I look around at the world today with the war and violence, refugees, conflict, climate change, corporate greed, leading to destruction of the environment, pollution, that giant gyre of plastic twice as big as Texas floating in the East Pacific, I don't necessarily see a lot of wisdom. But as you point out, just like Elvis's mother saw that guitar, the answers lie within us all. And if we can simply start taking responsibility for our choices and wake up to the fact that we're in this together, that we all share this planet with our animal and plant friends, it's really time for us to take proper stewardship and to become wise. And I believe that's what this revolution in consciousness and the science of consciousness is here to help us do. It'll be a synthesis of science and spirituality. You can say religion if you're talking about religions that harbor the oneness and connectedness we all share, as opposed to religious dogma that might preach separation. But really, this is about unifying this world and coming to a deeper kind of appreciation for that healing force of love. And it can heal all of us as we serve as channels, conduits for that love. And remember that the hardships and challenges, as you point out, in many ways are gifts. As I said, it's how we respond to them. It's our free will response that will help us to grow into the true wisdom that I think is humanity's destiny. And all of that is absolutely deeply involved with this awakening to the true nature of consciousness and the nature of reality. So thank you for what you do, for sharing this message with the world. We really can have peace and prosperity for all, but we need to change our ways and wake up to our deeper inner nature. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. As all of my sisters and brothers following us right now, you know that the word doomsday in Quran and Arabic means the day that we wake up. So we should wake up before we wake up, and we should help each other to wake up by passing all these things, all these facts we learned from our very, very valuable people, just like Dr. Eben Alexander. He's a person who's bringing science and spirituality together, which is very few to find. So please follow him and read his books, because you will love his books and you will love his speeches. And please follow him, and please take really good advice from all the things that he has shared with us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And hope to see you soon also in Turkey too.
Yes, well, Denise, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I love what you're doing. So God bless you and all of your people, and bless this world. We can learn a lot more.